some relief from the strict critics argue that the waivers still require too much emphasis and standardized testing. As Congress and the President grapple with the recognition of NCLB, it seems clear that the major intent of the legislation to reduce the achievement gap between high-performing and low-performing students will remain the counterpiece of the act. Time will tell whether NLCB lofty goals will substantially improve the education of the nation's children. Excuse me. In 2010, President Obama and Secretary of Education Arne Duncan presented what has been described as a stick and carrot program to jumpstart what they consider to be exemplary educational ideas in practice, in hopes that other students will adopt similar practices called Race to the Top, and programs goals to reward school reform efforts and provide educational exemplars to nation's educational community, using $4.35 billion of stimulus monies as awards, and achieving various conditions such as eliminating legal barriers to charter schools, and administration hopes to bring about specific changes among them, such as these: adopting standards and assessments to prepare students to succeed in college and the workplace, to compete in the global economy, building data systems that measure student growth and success and inform teachers and principals about how they can improve instruction, recruiting, developing, rewarding, and retaining effective teachers and principals, especially where they are needed most, and finally, turning around our lowest achieving schools. The prize money for Race to the Top was awarded to 18 states and the District of Columbia. A recent report evaluating that the Race to the Top initiative concluded that the program is limited in what it can accomplish given the amount of money available, and that the winning states overpromised what they could achieve. Further, the report concluded the Race to the Top program did not address some of the most important reasons for low student achievement, including factors outside the school and the school funding inequities. Under NCLB, each state was required to develop standards of learning and test children annually in English language arts and mathematics. Some states developed high standards and rigorous assessment, whereas other states' standards and assessments were less rigorous. Because of the great variability of the state to state, and we're going to the top of page 369, the Nation Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officials initiated the Common Core State Standards Project to develop common standards in English language arts and mathematics. As of 2014, 45 states and the District of Columbia have adopted the standards, and several states have piloted the assessments. In addition, several science organizations have developed the next generation science standards for K-12 schools. Since the adoption of the Common Core standards by the vast majority of states, significant opposition to the standards and assessments has arisen. As a condition for getting waivers from NCLB, the U.S. Department of Education required states to adopt Common Core standards, which controversies protested on the basis of federal instruction into states' rights. Some liberals also objected to the standards, arguing that they have not been field tested and that the whole standards movement in the United States has failed to improve academic performance in significant manner. Although most other countries have national education standards, the issue in the United States remains a highly controversial topic. There is a difference between standards and curriculum. Standards are statements of agreed upon expectations of what students are expected to know and be able to do in certain subjects and at certain grade levels. In other words, outcomes. A curriculum consists of the approaches and materials that teachers use to help students meet their standards, although the U.S. seems to be moving closer to a set of national standards, at least in certain subjects. The notion of a national curriculum at present is far off. One advocate for a national curriculum, however, is E.D. Hirsch Jr., who popularized the concept of cultural literacy. He presents the equality argument, insisting that a national curriculum is needed because so many students move around from state to state, from school to school. With a national curriculum, relocated students will be able to integrate easily into their new school environment with no time lost academically speaking. Hirsch points to facts such as these: 1/5 of all Americans relocate every year, 1/6 of all third graders attend at least 3 different schools between 1st and 3rd grade, and a typical inner city school has a 50% turnover between September and May. Others make the quality argument by citing the educational excellence attained by France, Germany, and Japan, all countries with national curricula, national standards, and national exams. These proponents insist that a national curriculum will ensure that all students in the United States receive a high-quality education no matter where they attend school. Other educators strongly oppose national standards and an accompanying curriculum and testing program, fearing an educational power grab by the federal government. In their view, the idea of a Washington bureaucrats instead of locally accountable individuals answering the questions, what should our children know and how well should they know it, seems both educationally flawed and politically dangerous. Opponents also believe that in a large nation with so many racial, religious, and ethnic groups and so many regional traditions, a national curriculum would trample on cultural diversity and promote bland sterility. Further, many are convinced that a national curriculum would put disadvantaged students at an even greater disadvantage. It would appear that the current Common Core Standards movement represents a compromise, national standards, but on a voluntary basis. And we go to the top of 370. One of the most interesting educational developments is the appearance of networks of schools and school districts. Among these loose voluntary alliances are the coalition of essential schools begun by the late Theodore Caesar, the network of schools modeled after James Comer's New Haven School Development Program, John Goodlad's National Network of Educational Renewal, Robert Slavin's Success for All Schools, Henry Levin's Accelerated Schools, and Schools of Character formed by the Character Education Partnership. Schools in these networks commit themselves to a common educational idea or set of ideas rather than a prescribed course of study or approach to teaching and learning. Most of the reforms of the previous 2 decades successfully and otherwise took place in elementary schools and to a lesser extent middle schools. However, in 2005, a long overdue campaign to reform U.S. high schools was launched. The initiators of this transformational project are a coalition of state governors, foundation directors, and business leaders, including Microsoft's Bill Gates himself, a rather successful college dropout. And now we go to the top of 371. The group believes that the current American high school is the obsolete institution out of touch with the global world of work and the demands of higher education. Its members are concerned that our trading partners around the world have more rigorous and productive high schools than that of the United States. In response to these concerns, they have dedicated implementing several of the changes recommended in this chapter, essentially higher academic standards accompanied by a more rigorous curriculum and a better testing and accountability system that measures students' readiness for work and for college, armed with strong financial support from the business and foundations, plus fresh, compelling evidence that the I cannot pronounce this word, of many high school graduates. This coalition is seeking wider support to transform U.S. high schools and launched the American Diploma Project Network, by which governors, state educators, officials, post-secondary leaders, and business executives work together to improve post-secondary preparation by aligning high school standards, graduation, and careers. As of 2014, this network has grown to 35 states, educating 85% of all public schools and students in them. Whether this unique partnership of businessmen, foundation directors, and governors has the energy and leverage to change the U.S. high school in fundamental ways remains to be seen. Excuse me. Overall, 2 things are clear about the educational reform and then at the national level. We are all in the middle of a strong push toward national influence on education. Second, there has to be a robust response from the states to improve their content standards and to hold local school districts accountable for these standards by imposing statewide testing and high-stakes consequences. These days, strong local control over schools in the United States appear to be waning. As education evolved into a more national issue, reform also became a hot political topic on levels from the State House to the mayor's office. Statewide task forces were formed by governors, state legislators, and state boards of education, and a large number were formed by citizen groups and foundations. Some states have several task forces operating on the same issues at the same time. Numerous local school districts established their own blue ribbon commissions to respond to what was increasingly called the school crisis. There was, however, one common theme, the call for excellence. Throughout both American industry and education, mediocrity was the dominant criticism and the existing educational system, and excellence became the rallying cry of the reforms. Many of these state and local task reports have excellence or quality in their titles because they were task force, and reports were sponsored by state governmental agencies or well-connected citizen groups or educational foundations. The recommendations were quickly turned into legislative proposals for school reform. At the state level, the call for excellence came down to specific proposals for change. The most widely adopted state reforms are described next. Instead of mandating, we go to the top of page 372 now. Instead of mandating the students take only 1 or 2 years of English and history, states began requiring 3 or 4 years in core subjects to be awarded academic high school diplomas. Science and advanced mathematics courses were required. The idea of, quote, social promotion came under great pressure and has been eliminated in many places, especially with advent of mandated tests for graduation. Spurred on by the United States mediocrity performance on recent international studies of math and science proficiency, the majority of states have increased the number of academic credits needed for graduations, with particular increases in the number of years in science and mathematics. Research has shown quality instruction time rather than time nearly spent in class is the key to quality schooling. Nevertheless, in the minds of many educators, the sort of school day and the long academically follow period between June and September are major causes of the poor performance in U.S. students. More time in school overall, they suggest, improves the chances of having more high-quality time. In response to this notion, school days, which in many locals were only 5.5 to 6 hours, were lengthened to 6.5 or 7 hours a school year, which in many states has been 170 to 175 days or fewer, has been lengthened to an average of 180 days, although states still vary between 160 days to 190 days of school per year. Though many of the reform reports recommended that U.S. schools follow the example of Japan, 240 days, and Germany, 216 and 240 days, no states and relatively few school districts have taken such a major step in lengthening the school year. One reason is that lengthening the amount of schooling is extremely costly. In some states, the idea of year-round education has attracted the attention of educators. In most year-round schools, students go to school the same number of days in a traditional school, but the school days are more evenly distributed throughout the school year. The most popular schedule is referred to as 45 and 15. Students attend school for 45 days and then have 15 days vacation. In the summer, students have 6 weeks vacation instead of the usual 8 to 10. In 2013, 3,200 public schools as well as many private schools in the United States have adopted some kind of year-round schedule. Critics of year-round education cite the strain of the schedule places on school finances when upgrades such as air conditioning are needed. They also are concerned about distributing established family life patterns and summer opportunities for teachers' professional development. On the other hand, proponents insist that a long 10-week summer vacation is hardest on poor children for whom camps and pricey recreational and enrichment programs are out of reach. They argue that the academic ground lost over the summers is a significant contributor to the achievement gap that separates high and low income children. President Obama, citing the fact that students in many other countries yearly spend at least a month longer in school than our students, urged that American students have a longer school year. One of the major state-driven reform efforts in the 1980s and 90s was the move to improve the quality of U.S. teaching forces. 2 initiatives were particularly notable in this regard: teacher competency testing and career ladder programs. We now go to the middle of page 373. The first initiative, teacher competency testing, was not new, though it emerged with a vengeance during the last 2 decades of the 20th century. Almost all states have some form of teacher testing, which typically takes place when candidates are leaving their teacher education programs before they are receiving their state license. One vexing issue that has plagued the movement for teacher competency teaching has been the definition